Welcome to the first official episode of the Deep Root Connections podcast. In this episode, I would like to formally introduce myself and share a little bit of my background so you can understand more about me and where I'm coming from and how I ended up here. So this might be a little bit longer of an episode than I'm planning for my future episodes, but I think it's important to share a little bit about my story. So let's get to it. I am going to start when I was little. This definitely has been an entire journey for me my whole life. So just for a little bit of context, I definitely was your wild child, not misbehaved by any means, but my hair was always long and messy. I often had sticks in my hair. I still do today. I would run around the neighborhood barefoot. I grew up in a suburban environment. We had a really lovely backyard. My mom was a gardener. We had a bunch of animals, and I guess I just had your traditional Western American childhood. I played soccer and basketball and played with the neighborhood kids until it got dark. But I did realize when I was younger that I definitely wasn't quite the same as everybody else. I always wanted to play with the bugs and the worms, and I loved wandering around the neighborhood, looking at all of the plants, sometimes sampling them. I would eat them, thinking that all of the plants were edible. Luckily, none of them were poisonous. I would play in the wind. I loved time alone. I spent a lot of time alone, and I was never bothered by that. I had my dogs and my rabbit, the wind, and kind of reflecting back on my childhood now, I realize that I used to play with the wind quite a bit. I would go out there and just lean into the wind and dance, and or I would wander the halls in my house acting like I was a cougar, and I could really feel the energy and power of a mountain lion in my body. And so my imagination was pretty wild, or at least, what most people call your imagination. And luckily for me, I never really lost that aspect. Very lucky in that regard. But when I did end up going to school, I realized not everybody was quite like that. They didn't want to spend time looking at the anthill at recess. They wanted to go race and jump and do what kids do. So I learned pretty quickly how to sort of modify my behavior to do what the normal kids did. I was really fortunate, however, because both of my parents were teachers. So every summer for 3 months, my dad, he's amazing. He has such a wild spirit. He loves adventuring. So he would pack up the family, dogs, my mom, my brother, and we would all go to the mountains, usually for a month, sometimes a little bit longer. And we would camp and we would immerse ourselves in nature. I think I was 6 years old when I went on my first overnight backpacking trip. And I just loved it so much. I could be out in the wild nature, the wildlife. We used to go on wildlife drives every evening to go to some of the wildlife viewing locations. We went to Rocky Mountain National Park, the Tetons, and Glacier. We were definitely really into the national parks. So we frequented them a lot. And and that was just my childhood. It was great. And all of that opportunity to stay connected with nature, I'm so fortunate. It drove my inspiration to study wildlife biology and conservation. I always wanted to save the animals and nature and preserve what I dearly loved. And so I studied wildlife biology and halfway through the program, it was a 4-year program, I kind of realized I wasn't aligned, but that really was my only option, at least so I thought. And so I just stuck with it. I graduated and I started to do field work. Um, and it was another kind of confirmation that I just wasn't aligned in that field. I loved the work. I loved being outside. I thought I was making a difference, kind of. But in uh, in wildlife, there's a lot of politics and decision making, and I don't know, it just didn't fit. It didn't feel right. So I took myself out of that working force and decided to take a different route. I went to outdoor education, specifically for children. I love it. I love doing that work. I worked at a wildlife rehabilitation center for a while. I just kind of bebopped my way. There were a lot of different jobs. So part of my background is also I've always had this intense, really intense drive to make a difference. I've always known that I was here to do something, and it felt big. Um, make a big impact. That's just the feeling I always had, and I don't know. I didn't know how to channel that energy or where to look. My options were vet school or wildlife biology. It's like, okay, I guess I'll pick this one. So, anyways, after after I got into the workforce, did a lot of different jobs, I just realized it wasn't cutting it. Nothing I tried was cutting it. I got so frustrated. I just remember multiple times just crying out of pure frustration. And anger, a little bit of anger, because having that intense drive to make a difference and do something and trying to find that space and just not finding it was torture. It was torture. Why have a passion? Why have this drive? Why have something pushing you forward when all you do is find yourself unfulfilled and miserable? I think one year I had 7 or 8 jobs. I overlapped quite a bit. I would work 2 jobs at a time to sort of make ends meet, but part of that also was just trying to figure out where the heck was supposed to be in this world. Where do I fit in? And yeah, I did have a lot of moments, breakdown moments where it's just like I need it to go away. I need this intense drive, intense whatever is inside of me to go away. I needed it to go away, or I needed it to find the door or the direction that it was supposed to go through. And I quit all of my jobs. I didn't want to be in that space anymore. And I ended up taking a job as a landscaper at a golf course. It was the best job ever because it was so chill. I got to drive around in my golf cart first thing in the morning, watch the sunrise, I'd find all these little frogs and hear all the nature in the morning. And quite literally, my job was to do the landscaping. So this golf course was kind of a resorty golf course, but it also had a community. So I got to take care of the people's homes and their landscaping also. So it was a lot of fun. I got to spend a lot of time by myself tinkering with the plants and making sure everything was beautiful. And I loved it. It just gave me the space that I needed to sort of figure my life out. So at this time, I so for some reason, I was one day working and I thought, I guess I should listen to some podcasts. I don't know. That wasn't really something that I did. And so I, for whatever reason, turned on spiritual podcasts. Now, I have always sort of been spiritual. Um, my aunt can see auras. My cousin, she can see spirits. And yeah, there's a lot of really sensitive people in my family, but nobody ever really talked about it. It was just kind of there. Um, I just I didn't think I was sensitive or anything, but for whatever reason, anyways, I was like, I just kind of want to listen to some spiritual podcasts. I actually started with animal communication. I had used an animal communicator in the past, and so that made sense for me. I was like, oh, I'll start there. Well, that turned into me binge listening to spiritual podcasts the entire summer for 8 hours a day. I had to keep listening to more and more and more, and I had no idea why. Some of them, I was just like, why am I listening to this? I'm hooked, but I don't even know what these people are talking about. So, so I basically put myself on a fast track to learn as much spiritual stuff as humanly possible without really understanding why or realizing that's what I was doing. But at the same time, I was in this space of just, I don't know what my next move is. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm open. At this point, emotionally, I was open to options. I didn't know, and I didn't have any expectation. And at that point, I quite frankly didn't care. I just needed a lead or a nudge forward. I was actually planning to open up my own greenhouse to sell native plants um, for wildlife gardens and food, medicinals. That was kind of my potential option. But what ended up happening, and this is where it starts to get good. I went to work one day and one of my coworkers said, hey, I have this cat. She just randomly showed up and I don't know what to do with her and I can't afford to feed her. Oh, okay, no big deal. Like, if you can trap her, bring her to me and I'll see what we can do. I just figured she's feral. This was a really rural area and most of the cats that were free range were feral. So I was like, if you can catch her. Well, he did. He brought me this beautiful kitty the next day. And I looked at her and I was like, you are not feral, my friend. You are not feral at all. And you are extremely fat. And she was so pregnant. I was like, okay, crap. Now I have a pregnant cat. So I took her home and I put her in a shed. And I know that sounds kind of sketchy, but this shed was made for somebody's office. So it was a really plush shed. And I had a dog that wouldn't tolerate cats at the time. So that was my best option for her. So I put her in the shed. She was so cozy. And I took her to the vet the next day just to kind of gauge, make sure she was healthy. Well, the vet said that she was due to have her babies like any day. She was such a small kitty and her belly was so big and she had a lot of them in there. So she just estimated, well, she's probably due soon. That wasn't the case. She was only Oh, partway through her gestation, I would say about halfway through. So I ended up keeping her for several months. I got to get to know her. She's such a lovely cat. What was unusual about this situation is that usually when animals come into my life, they get named right away. It's like immediate. Well, with this kitty, I would look at her and I would think, okay, let's give you a name. And nothing would come into my mind. It was like mush brain. I don't know why, but nothing could come to me. So she went nameless for several months. And that kind of irritated me because it's like, we're basically family at this point. You at least should have a name. So eventually she had her kittens, 7 of them in total. That was my first time witnessing a kitty giving birth and helping. The last one that came out got stuck. Mama was so tired, and so I assisted with the final birth, which there's more to that story, maybe in another podcast, but all the kittens were healthy and beautiful, and it was amazing. And it was just such a gift to be able to witness that. After the kitties grew up enough to go outside, I had this little chicken coop that was fully enclosed so they could run around and get their zoomies out and play. uh, I did that every single day after work. I let the cats out and had them play and enjoy the moment of just serenity. We lived at a quiet property with trees and oh, it was lovely. So this day, I put Mama Kitty and kittens out, and I was just sitting there, just feeling so peaceful, enjoying the breeze and the pines and the kittens playing. And then the weirdest thing happened. I could feel this Mama Kitty's eyes on me. You know how when somebody's looking at you or you're out in the forest walking and you feel that really intense somebody or something's watching me feeling? I got that feeling. I looked over and this Mama Kitty with her big yellow eyes was just staring at me. Like I felt like she was lasering into my soul. It was so intense. And I looked at her and I said, "What is your name?" And I'm pretty sure I said it just like that. And instantly, Samantha popped into my head and it was in her voice. And it was like, without a doubt, this cat just told me her name. I was so excited. And then all of a sudden, I could hear all these little tiny voices chirping in the background also. All the little kittens were sharing their names too. And I just sat there like, yeah, that happened. It actually just felt so normal and natural. It was like, cool, now I know your name, finally. I feel like maybe I should have questioned it more, but I didn't. I just knew that that's what happened. The big question that I had was, oh my gosh, I can do this. Can I do it again? How do I do it again with intention? And so this Samantha, Mama Kitty, she kind of kicked my boulder off the hill. And I literally just started learning everything I could about animal communication and meditation. And she opened that door for me. And I'm so, so grateful for that. I actually still have one of her kittens, that very last one that I had to assist with. I'm sure you'll see her wandering the video if you're watching the videos. She likes to be part of the show. But she opened my doorway to animal communication. Now, I never in a million years thought that I would offer sessions professionally. I didn't want to do that. I just, at this point, was curious. I was curious. I took a lot of different classes, a lot of different kinds of classes, not just animal communication classes. I was taking meditation classes, working on my breathing and my intuition in general. I learned that I was intuitive, but pretty dense. Like I had to learn and practice. So, anyways, I had started to sort of kind of open up my animal communication skills and my intuition. So, when I started to get the feeling that my dog, Grizz, I just got a feeling that something wasn't quite right. I didn't know what, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I just had a weird feeling like something is just not quite right. And so, after sitting with that feeling for about a week, I was just like, we have to get him in. We have to take him to the vet. So we took him to the vet. She did some blood work. Oh, he looks fine. We'll just do some blood work. Okay, cool. Okay, I trust the vet, you know. I took him home and I sat down. I wanted to go through some of the meditations I had recently purchased. So I sat down on the floor with him. He put his head on my lap. Um, and I went into meditation. It was a guided meditation, so I had my eyes shut. And when those were done, I noticed that Grizz was pretty out of it. So I just kind of gently put his head down on the floor and I let him be. I walked away. Um, and about half an hour later, I don't remember exactly what I was doing. I was at the kitchen table or something like that, just kind of sitting there. And I had this like punch in the gut kind of feeling. And in my mind, I heard Grizz. And I thought, shoot. I went over to check on him and he was on his way out. And I could not accept that. So I picked up this 85-pound dog and I put him in my car and I drove as fast as I could to the vet, which was like 25 minutes away. Calling my husband, you have to get here. This is not good. Like, you have to say goodbye. Um, and we did end up losing him that day, but a lot of things kind of happened. So we put him to rest. He was in the back of our car. I wanted him to be super comfortable. Oh, we're gonna try and get through this. Sorry. I am not going to apologize for crying, actually. That's what I've decided. Anyways, so he was in the back of our car, and because I had taken all of these animal communication classes, you know, they say we'll try to hold space, don't be overly emotional, and I could do it actually. And I'll talk more about that later in some other episodes. But I could hold space for him. I was very calm. I mean, I had a few hours to sort of navigate my emotions around this, but I whispered to him, I said, if you're not ready to cross over and want to stay, you can just stay with me, stay close to me. Or if you're ready, that's fine too. We'll be okay. And I just whispered that to him twice before he transitioned. And then we left his body there to be cremated. But on the way home, my husband looked out the car window and he said, there's a dog in the sky running in the clouds. He took a picture of it. If I can find it, I'll post it on my Instagram page. But we saw him in the clouds and I could feel his energy in the back of the car still. I knew he didn't cross over. I knew he was still with us. But I was so new to all of this that I didn't really know. I guess it was just kind of a feeling. Um, and so when we got home, we just sort of sat down in that kind of numbed out state. Didn't want to think, didn't want to feel, Just kind of wanted to turn off everything. And our fire alarm went off. And I had heard that spirits can manipulate electricity. And so our fire alarm went off and went chirp. And it only did it once. And I was like, that's Grizz. And I actually laughed because I was like, of course, it's just confirmation that I could feel him. And my husband got so mad. He's like, not now. Because he thought that the fire alarm was like out of batteries or had some issues. And I was like, no, it's Grizz. I promise. And so it only tripped the one time. And that helped me, at least, just kind of know that he was there still. And then I swear, this is just like the craziest thing for me. I was at this point literally just dipping my toe into animal communication. So I didn't really know that there was more. But when I went to bed that night, my cat, Mama Kitty's baby, she was sitting on my chest, and I was looking at her eyes, and they were darting all around me. Right here, right here, right here, right here, all around my head. And I was like, that's weird. She doesn't normally do that. She's usually like an eye gazer. She'll normally like stare into my soul through my eyes. Well, she's just like her eyes are bouncing around my head. Oh, that's weird. Okay. Anyways, kind of just disregarded it. When I was finally ready to shut my eyes to go to bed, the moment I shut my eyes, I had this super intense vision of Grizz's face, kind of like a silhouette of his face, and rainbows lit up my eyes, and a Pegasus was there. I know, right? I mind blown. But it was amazing because I could feel Grizz, his energy so strong. And the rainbows were just beautiful and sparkling. But the Pegasus was kind of like in the back of my vision, looking over his shoulder. And I could feel his energy really strongly too. He was so impatient. I could feel his like, come on, it's time to go kind of vibe that he was putting out there. And I thought, holy moly, he did wait. Grizz did wait. He waited to cross over. And right now he's telling me that he's crossing over. And it was just the weirdest thing. It was another one of those moments where it's like, yeah, that happened. But a Pegasus? I'm sorry. Like, that's too out there for me. Anyways, so this vision eventually faded and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't tell anybody. I mean, who am I supposed to tell, right? Hi, yeah, my dog died and then I saw a Pegasus. My family's tapped in, but I don't know. I wasn't quite ready to share that yet. Um, so I sat with it. I I literally did not know what to do with it. Um, and then I moved on. I moved on, muddled about the next few months, and then we got a call that my horse got hurt. Uh, definitely a fatal injury, but it was kind of a long, drawn out process. So he wasn't at my house at this time. I had a friend watching him, and it was just one of those things. He tripped, he got hurt. There wasn't much anybody could have done to prevent it. But when she called me, I said, no, he's coming home. For however long he has left, he has to be at my house. And so I set up my whole space to bring him home and his brother, Rooster. They both got to come home. And he was basically in hospice care. He had an injury to his back leg that we had to care for. He actually went to the hospital for a couple of days getting some really intense care. When I visited him in the hospital, I asked him how he was doing, and he said, "I'm in jail." I was like, I know. So he was used to pasture. He was used to having a large paddock, not a closed-in box stall. And so he told me that he felt like he was in jail. And I thought, yeah, okay, it's time to go bring him home. So I took him home that day. And he mellowed out quite a bit. He was so happy to be home, but we were fighting a battle that we weren't going to win. And so we had about a month of really intense care. But again, at this time, I was just kind of feeling my way through animal communication. And he guided me the whole way. He asked for specific treats. Every once in a while I was walking around my house, I'd hear carrots or apples. And so I'd go take him a special treat. And oh, I love him so much. But he guided me through the end of life process. I didn't want him to hold on longer than he needed to. I didn't want to make the call too soon. And so for him, I mean, he was my baby. I had him throughout my teens, through college. Um, he was there when I had my baby. He literally just grew up with me. He held that space. And so this was hard. I wasn't ready to let him go. But he guided the whole process. And the day before he died, I knew we were close. I just, I was going to make the call. I didn't want to make the call. And he sent me a song. I don't know if you're a Frozen 2 fan or have seen it, but there's a song that Elsa sings, and the lyrics are, "Don't make me wait one moment more." And he sent that song to me, and I knew that it was time. He was ready, I was ready, it was going to be okay. And so I made the call for him, and he had a very peaceful passing. And I was okay with it, for, I guess, as much as one can be, but it was peaceful, and I knew he was going to be okay. I didn't feel his spirit next to me after he crossed. I feel like he popped out of his body and was bucking and jumping and enjoying enjoying being free. Yeah, it felt great actually. I know that sounds weird, but so that day it was just kind of a really peaceful day. I loved on the other animals and watched the clouds. And at night, my cat was laying on my chest. And I thought, okay, let's do this. I could feel the Pegasus. I could feel his energy in front of me. And my thought was, you wait for me. Like, I'm not ready to accept this quite yet. And so I asked this Pegasus to wait. He had such strong energy. And the moment I closed my eyes, he rushed my vision like a flying Pegasus swooping up into my face. And I knew that he was here for Foolish. I knew that he was here to help, and I knew that it was real. Again, he came twice within, I mean, we lost them really kind of back to back. And so I get on Google. I'm like, what the heck is this Pegasus thing all about? And the first thing I found was that Pegasus in some cultures are known to be transporters of souls. And I was like, yeah, okay, I will accept that. Pegasus are real. I mean, I don't know. I guess I could have called myself crazy. I could have gone that route of like I made it up. Absolutely not going to go there because I knew it was real. Kind of going back to my childhood, I always knew that there was more. I always felt kind of fairy Pegasus kind of energy, kind of looking back at it now. So when all of this happened, I mean, it kind of just blew my gates wide open. It's like, yep, okay, here we go. We're going. We're going forward with this. And so because of my two animals transitioning and being able to feel them and hear them and kind of have them guide me, even though with Grizz it was super sudden, I decided that if I could help somebody else hear, know what their animals want or need at the end of life phase to give these people moving through it some peace, I was going to go there. And that's when I started to deep dive into professional animal communication courses. I opened up my business, and that was that. That was it. I was like, I'm good. I'm solid. I feel like I have my mission fulfilled. I feel so satisfied. I'm making a difference. But about a year after that, after I started working with clients, I found myself getting called back into nature. I had definitely taken myself out of nature for a little bit to really focus on the business. I didn't go out into the forest as much as I normally would have in the past. And so I did start to notice that after client calls, I'd be looking out my window and just my heart would ache. I needed to go back into the forest. I needed some time. And I don't know if you're familiar with John Muir at all, but he has this quote: "The forest is calling and I must go." And that's exactly what it felt like. So I also kind of felt like I was stalling out in my business. Felt like there was more. I just, I didn't know what. And so I leaned into my animals and I asked them, what's next? What do I do? What's my next step forward? And they told me, go find yourself a tree guide. Go into the forest, go find yourself a tree guide, and that's your next step. And I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. What do you mean a tree guide? But I did it. I had heard of people that could talk to nature. That honestly, though, to me was a little far out there. I'm sorry. Like, how do trees communicate? I don't get it, but I'm open. At this point, I was open to all possibilities. And so I took myself on a walk. I took my dogs with me, loaded them up, and I took a day off to just see what would come. So I got to the trailhead and I was like, I'll just hike like 5 miles or something, get the heart pumping. Well, that's not what happened. I got to the trailhead, I let my dogs out, and I started down my path. And I think about 50 yards, maybe 100 yards down the trail, I felt this presence, this very gentle masculine presence, kind of on the right side of my aura, my body, just magnetically pulling at me. And I was like, what is that? So I look over and there's this beautiful tree in the middle of this meadow right next to a creek. And I thought, oh, that's really beautiful. Like that would be a great spot to sit, maybe after my hike. So I kept going. I kept walking. I was like, I'm going to finish my hike today. I have an agenda. Well, I think it was about 3 steps that I took. And I was like, nope, right now. And so I turned around and I went down the hill and I sat down next to this tree. And I thought, maybe this is a guide. I don't know. And now what do I do? How do you talk to a tree? And so I leaned back into my animal communication sessions. I was like, I'll just open it up like a session. I don't know what else to do. So I quieted my body and my mind. I got my pen and paper out. And I just sat there for a second, like, all right. And literally, once I opened up that space, the same masculine energy came in and he started talking to me. This beautiful tree. And I know it was coming from the tree, definitely. This beautiful tree started talking to me. He had this like grandfatherly type voice and energy. I felt like he was giving me a welcome home hug. We both ended up crying. I could feel his energy kind of sobbing, like, I haven't communicated with a person in so long. His heart was open, my heart was open, and it was just like a coming home moment, I guess. We had a few words. He gave me some really lovely guidance on kind of my soul path, my next steps. Essentially, he told me that I'm here to help the earth, I'm here to help nature, and that I was somebody that could share the messages of all of the nature beings. And I was like, what do you mean, nature beings? We didn't really go down that path, but that was something that stuck out. And we kind of just left it there. I wasn't really aware of much else after that, but he did drop a cone. I'll show it to you. If you're watching the video, you'll be able to see this. Um, he dropped a little cone almost right on my head, and he said, take that with you, take it home. That way you can connect with me whenever you want. And so I brought that cone home, and he's been an acting guide of mine for years now, for years. But he opened the gateway to tree communication, and he taught me about how trees heal the land, how they anchor in energy in certain places, and he encouraged me to start communicating with stone beings. Rocks, yes, that one was a mind boggle too at first. So a little bit about me is that I resisted everything. I'm like, I'm sorry, rocks can't talk. They can, by the way. They've got all sorts of wisdom and medicine to share, but all of the experiences that I have had, it all started with animal communication. And then listening to the guidance that I was receiving from pretty much anything that would come my way. The animals will tell me to go do this, and I did. I was just kind of uh, a willing servant, if you will, to their wishes. I mean, they didn't lead me wrong. When I opened up my animal communication business and I was at a transition point, and I knew that they would lead me to where I needed to go. And so I followed the breadcrumbs. And the more I communicated with nature, the more the spirits of nature came forward, and everything sort of fell into place. I, for the first time in my entire life, feel like I'm exactly where I need to be, and I'm doing exactly what I need to do, and it feels so good. I will say that there was a ton of fear, a ton of fear. Like, this didn't happen overnight. I will talk more about moving through fear and what that was like later, of course, but there was a lot of growth within a 3-year period where I had to shed a lot of layers, really go within, and kind of come out on the other side, maybe a little beat up, but just knowing in my heart that everything was exactly as it should be. So that is the conclusion of my drawn out story for you, a little bit of my background and how I ended up here. And my friends, there's so much more to my story that hopefully I will peel away as I share stories and messages from nature beings and the animals. But I guess I'll wrap up my story for today. And I just want to say thank you so much for giving it a listen. And I look forward to seeing you next time.